My name is Maren Kessler. I'm 36 years old, and tonight, at my sister's engagement party, I was introduced to the crowd as her adorable little sister who works the phones at the courthouse. That exact phrase, delivered with a sparkle in her voice and a gentle pat on my arm like I was a child playing dress-up. What Sloane didn't realize, what she never bothered to ask, is that I've worn the black robe for 3 years now. I am a federal judge in the Northern District of California, and I've presided over some of the most contested corporate litigation cases in the state. But to my family, I'm just Maren, the quiet one. The convenient one. The one who never interrupted the fantasy they built around my sister. She was always the headline, the speaker, the golden child who could light up a room with a smile and disappear the truth with a shrug. I learned long ago that trying to stand tall next to Sloane only got me knocked sideways. So I let them believe what they wanted. I let them shrink me. But tonight, as her fiancé raised a glass and told the room how grateful he was to marry such a powerful woman, Sloane turned to me with her usual smirk and said, "Some people run media campaigns. Others run errands for judges." The table laughed politely. Her fiancé chuckled until he turned to me, narrowed his eyes, and asked, "Wait, what do you actually do at the courthouse?" I met his gaze. He didn't recognize me yet, but I recognized him. He'd been in my courtroom, twice. The smile dropped from his face before I even answered, and I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand or make a scene. I just lifted my glass, set it gently on the table, and said the one word that ended the lie they'd all rehearsed for years. "Judge." And that's when everything froze. I used to think silence was survival, that if I kept my head down, played nice, smiled when prompted, and faded into the background, I'd be safe from judgment, not the legal kind, the family kind. The kind that starts at holiday dinners and festers in the spaces between questions no one really wants answered. In my family, we never asked how you were not really. We asked what you were doing, who you were impressing, and how it looked on paper. Sloane always had answers. A new campaign, a rising follower count, another award from some glossy marketing publication that made my parents beam with pride. She gave them something shiny to hold up, something they could mention at church or during brunch with their country club friends. I gave them discomfort, complexity, a daughter they couldn't quite explain. I had barely finished law school when Sloane landed her first national ad campaign. She wore a red suit to our parents' anniversary dinner and got a standing ovation from Uncle Grant for negotiating a 7-figure budget. I had just started clerking for a superior court judge in Alameda County, working 12-hour days, barely sleeping, living off lentils and determination. I tried to talk about one of the cases I was helping on, a brutal labor rights lawsuit involving undocumented farm workers. My father nodded politely, then turned to Sloane and asked if her campaign was going to be on TV. That's when I learned to stop explaining. By the time I became an assistant district attorney, I'd already stopped bringing my work to the table. If they didn't ask, I didn't offer. And when I moved from prosecution to the bench, the youngest female judge appointed in our district in decades, I sent the announcement to just one family member, my grandmother June. She was the only one who ever looked me in the eye without blinking. The rest of them didn't notice I'd stopped sharing, or maybe they noticed and liked it better that way. At birthdays, I brought flowers and cleared dishes. At Thanksgiving, I got stuck refilling drinks while Sloane presented slide decks of her latest client victories. People would nod along like they were listening to a TED Talk. When they looked at me, it was with soft smiles and no follow-ups. I became a fixture, background, conveniently invisible. The only time I ever saw a flash of something different was in my grandmother's eyes. She'd grip my hand under the table, lean over and whisper, "You're not the quiet one. You're just the one they're afraid to ask about." I didn't believe her then. But standing at that table, just seconds after I said the word judge, I started to. The day I was sworn in as a federal judge, the courtroom was nearly empty. No streamers, no applause. Just me, my mentor Judge Abbott, 2 clerks, and my grandmother June sitting quietly in the front row wearing her best navy coat and a pin shaped like the scales of justice. When I walked up to take the oath, she stood, Not dramatically, just enough so I'd know she saw me. That was all I needed. I had waited for that moment my entire life. Not for the robe or the gavel or the title, but for the feeling that I had earned something no one could take away. I thought maybe, just maybe, someone from my family would show up, even if by accident. My mother had RSVP'd with an enthusiastic, "We'll see," and my father had texted, "Is this a public thing or more like paperwork?" Sloan never responded. They weren't busy. They just didn't think it mattered. The local legal paper published a short write-up 2 days later, noting my age, case record, and prior clerkships. My grandmother clipped it out and mailed it to me with a note that read, "The world always notices eventually. Love, June." After that, 2 years passed in near silence. I worked 5, sometimes 6 days a week. Criminal court on Mondays and Wednesdays. Civil hearings the rest. I presided over fraud, contracts, labor disputes, and 2 high-profile pharmaceutical trials that got national coverage, though no one in my family ever mentioned seeing them. I suspect they changed the channel. I told myself I didn't care. I poured everything into my work, into delivering rulings that were not only fair but deeply considered. I stayed late to write my own opinions, declined media interviews, and ignored the way my mother still referred to me in public as our daughter who works downtown at the courthouse. Whenever that phrase came up, people assumed I filed records or sat at reception. I stopped correcting them. Not because I was ashamed, but because I had grown tired of trying to narrate a truth no one wanted to hear. Grandmother June never played along. Every Christmas, she'd hand me a small gift labeled, "To the Honorable Marin Kessler," with a twinkle in her eye. Once, she slipped me a card that said simply, "History doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it walks in alone, then closes the door behind it." I kept that one in my office drawer. Still, there were moments when the silence got loud, like when my cousin Ava made partner at a tax firm and my parents hosted a dinner with embossed invitations. Or when Sloan was featured in a podcast about next-generation women in media and the family group chat lit up for hours. No one said a word when I was profiled in California Law Weekly, not even a thumbs up. It wasn't just being overlooked, it was being erased. And yet, I stayed quiet, not because I was weak, but because I thought maybe one day they'd look up and see me as I truly was, that maybe the truth didn't need to be forced, that it would find its moment, like a courtroom verdict, clear and irreversible. I didn't expect that moment to come with champagne and string lights, but it did. And when it did, it wasn't planned. It was provoked. The party was exactly what I expected. Pinterest perfect, overprocessed, and orchestrated down to the minute. Sloan had rented out the rooftop garden at the Alderidge downtown, complete with glass lanterns, custom cocktails named after inside jokes no one understood, and a quartet playing acoustic covers of pop songs. I arrived 15 minutes early because Mom asked me to help make sure the welcome table doesn't look sad. I didn't mind. It was easier to fold napkins than to explain why I'd come at all. Sloan made her grand entrance around 7, late by design, camera ready in a silver jumpsuit and heels too sharp for the tile. Her ring caught the string lights just right, and the crowd hushed as if royalty had entered. Garrett followed behind her tall, polished, with the carefully cultivated confidence of someone who'd never had to question how the world saw him. He didn't recognize me. Not yet. As they worked the room, my mother made a point to steer them toward the guests with the most influence, Garrett's senior partners, his firm's PR lead, a former state senator. I stayed near the bar, sipping seltzer and counting how many people assumed I was catering staff. I didn't correct them. My cousin Ava found me eventually, rolled her eyes, and said, "God, she's exhausting tonight." I smiled tightly, grateful for her honesty. "At least the food's good," I replied, and we both laughed. The toasts began just before dessert. My father opened with a speech about legacy marriages and building a life together that the community can admire. Then Sloan took the mic. Of course she did. She thanked everyone for coming, praised Garrett's firm, mentioned a client win that had landed them in Business Insider. And then, as she scanned the room, her eyes landed on me. And of course, she said sweetly, a big thank you to my little sister Marin, who keeps things running down at the courthouse. Probably filed Garrett's last traffic ticket. The room chuckled. Not loud, but enough to sting. Garrett turned toward me, a little surprised, like he was seeing me for the first time. Wait, courthouse? He asked. What exactly do you do there? I didn't blink. I saw the flicker in his eyes, the way memory tugged at recognition. Before I could speak, Sloane laughed. She's being modest. Admin stuff. She's great at organization. That's when Garrett froze. His jaw shifted, his brow creased. And in that pause, I realized something was unraveling. He wasn't asking me what I did. He was trying to remember where he'd seen me before, where I was standing, what I was wearing, what my title had been when he called his client to the stand, and I told him to proceed. The air shifted subtle at first, like someone had turned down the volume on the entire evening. Garrett's gaze didn't leave mine, and his smile, the one he had been using all night like a reflex, was gone. His eyes searched my face like he was flipping through mental files, trying to place where he knew me from. What exactly do you do at the courthouse, Marin? He asked again, this time slower. I set my glass down gently, careful not to make a sound. The hum of chatter faded. My grandmother, June, sitting at the edge of the patio, turned her head slightly. She knew. She had always known. I looked directly at Garrett. I'm a federal judge, I said simply. The silence dropped like a stone in water. It rippled through the guests, their heads turning, forks stilled midair. Someone let out a half laugh, unsure if it was a joke. Sloane's mouth opened, then closed. You're kidding, she said, trying to chuckle. Marin, come on, don't be dramatic. She's not, Garrett said, his voice strangely hollow. Judge Kessler, Northern District. I've stood in your courtroom 2 years ago. Bradford Pharmaceuticals. He blinked, stunned. That was you. My father's face drained of color. My mother set her wineglass down too hard and the stem snapped, spilling rosé across the white tablecloth. No one moved to clean it. You said you worked for a judge, my mother whispered. I did, I replied calmly. For 5 years. Then I became one. Sloane's face twisted. Why wouldn't you just say that? Why let us all think you were some file clerk? I didn't let you think anything, I said evenly. You decided what I was, and I stopped correcting you. Garrett was still staring at me. I never connected your last name, he said quietly. You were sharp, fair, relentless. I nodded once. I still am. The silence turned heavy. Not angry. Not yet. Just disoriented. The story they had told themselves about me, about where I stood and what I was worth had just shattered. And in its place was something none of them were prepared to acknowledge. Sloane stood, scraping her chair against the concrete. This is supposed to be my engagement party, she snapped. And of course, somehow you make it about you. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word until you mocked me. Again, in front of everyone. Her lip trembled, just for a second, but she caught herself. Then she looked at Garrett, like she was waiting for him to say something and to fix it. But he didn't. He just looked at me, quiet and stunned. Because the truth, when it finally arrives, doesn't knock. It walks straight in and takes its seat at the table. No one said anything for a long time. It wasn't just quiet, it was still. Like the room had been flash frozen and no one knew how to thaw it. My mother dabbed at the wine stain with a linen napkin, though it only smeared deeper into the cloth. My father stood, then sat back down, unsure of what the moment called for. Garrett remained still, his fingers laced together on the table like he was holding something in place. Only my grandmother moved. She reached for her water, took a sip, and smiled faintly in my direction, as if to say, It's done now, love. You did it. Then Sloane turned and walked inside, her heels clipping against the tile like punctuation marks. Sharp, final, furious. Garrett hesitated for just a second, glanced at me, then followed. No one touched dessert. Later that night, when most of the guests had left and the waitstaff were clearing plates, I stood by the balcony railing, staring out at the lights of the city. It should have felt triumphant. I should have felt seen, validated, maybe even a little victorious. But all I felt was tired. Years of swallowing my own narrative had left an ache in my chest I didn't know how to name. My phone buzzed with missed calls and texts. Ava sent 3 crying, laughing emojis and, "Holy sh! To you, legend." A second cousin asked if I could help with a speeding ticket. My mother texted, "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" As if that question had an easy answer, as if she'd ever really asked before. But the message that made me pause came the next morning. A knock on my apartment door. No warning, no text. It was Garrett. He looked like a different man from the night before. No suit, no polished mask. Just jeans, a gray hoodie, and a face that had lost some of its structure under the weight of reality. "She doesn't know I'm here," he said, voice low. "May I come in?" I let him. We sat in the kitchen, 2 mugs of coffee cooling between us. He didn't touch his. "I wanted to apologize," he said finally, "for the way last night unfolded. I didn't know." "I believe you. I'm still trying to understand how someone like you could be in a family that—" He stopped himself. "They like their narratives clean," I said. "I never fit." He looked around at the framed degrees on the wall, the newspaper clipping my grandmother had sent me, the photo from my swearing-in ceremony. "You didn't just not fit, you outgrew it." "I stopped shrinking," I corrected. He nodded slowly. "I remember the Bradford case. You cut through every excuse we made, and still, you weren't cruel. You were decisive. I respected you then. I didn't even know your name." "And now?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. "Now I'm wondering what it says about Sloane that she needed to keep that version of you hidden." He stood a few minutes later, offered a quiet thank you, and left without promising anything. I didn't need him to. His presence had been enough. I stayed at the table long after he left. The morning sun crept across the tile, warming the edge of my coffee cup, and I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel invisible anymore. Not because they finally saw me, but because I had stopped waiting for them to. 3 days later, she knocked on my door. No makeup, hair in a loose knot, her coat mismatched to the weather. Sloane looked nothing like the woman who commanded that rooftop party. She looked like someone who had run out of stories. "Can I come in?" she asked. We sat on the couch without pretense. No small talk, just air thick with something neither of us could name. "I didn't know how far you'd come," she said after a long pause. "You didn't want to know," I replied. "That's not the same thing." She nodded, eyes damp. "I kept you small because I didn't know how to be anything but bigger." I let her words settle. "You don't have to be smaller than me," I said. "You just have to stop needing me to be less." She blinked fast, but the tears didn't fall. "Garrett's thinking about postponing the wedding." "I'm not here to fix that," I said. "I'm here because I stopped hiding." She stayed for half an hour, said little, listened more, and when she left, she looked back on Sanat for forgiveness, just acknowledgement. We weren't close after that, but we weren't strangers. My parents stopped introducing me as the one at the courthouse. My father, awkwardly, asked about a case once. My mother sent me a newspaper clipping with my name in it, underlined in blue ink. And Sloane? She never apologized outright. But one morning, she sent a photo of my courtroom door with my name on it. No caption. Just that. It wasn't an apology, but it was real. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. Not because they finally saw me, but because I stopped waiting for them to. And I realized, the truth doesn't need permission. It only needs a moment. And I'd claimed mine.